Thank you so much, Mr. President. Today, I'm briefing you from Damascus, where the atmosphere is ripe with cautious optimism and a yearning for renewal following far-reaching international moves on Syria. Last week, in a significant development celebrated across Syria, United States President Trump announced from Riyadh that he would order the cessation of sanctions on Syria. Yesterday, the European Union announced the lifting of its economic sanctions on Syria. The UK revoked their previous sanctions regime last month. I have long called for bold steps on sanctions, as have millions of Syrians in and outside the country, and I warmly welcome these international steps. I also warmly welcome the support extended by regional countries to Syria and its people, most notably Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Qatar, and other key partners. This includes not only initiatives on sanctions relief, but also to resolve Syria's outstanding obligations to international financial institutions, support in the payment of public sector salaries, and ensuring the provision of critical energy resources. Mr. President, these are indeed historic developments. They hold major potential to improve living conditions across the country and to support the Syrian political transition. And they give the Syrian people a chance to grapple with the legacy of misrule, conflict, abuses, and poverty from which they are trying to emerge. We will follow closely and support the moves to lift sanctions. But we also know that Syria faces significant structural challenges with an economy ravaged by over a decade of war and conflict and a host of other destabilizing factors. Revitalizing a devastated economy will require from the interim authorities sustained actions, including on overall economic reform and governance standards across the financial system, and this will need international support. Mr. President, I have taken note of the decrees issued last week by the interim authorities announcing the establishment of two keenly anticipated and key institutions, the National Commission for Transitional Justice and the National Commission for Missing Persons. The decree appointed their respective heads and gave them 30 days to form a team and develop internal regulations. The creation of a dedicated commission for missing persons attests to the centrality of this issue in the Syrian national experience, which has impacted almost every Syrian household, as we have heard from Syrians time and again. In its next steps, we hope this commission will move to cooperate with the UN dedicated bodies, Syrian civil society, and above all, with victims and survivors associations who have formulated concrete proposals for their inclusion in such a process. The creation of a Transitional Justice Commission is another essential stepping stone in Syria's recovery from conflict and the restoration of Syria's right to the truth, justice, and reparation. A victim-centered, inclusive, and comprehensive approach to transitional justice in line with the Constitutional Declaration as well as international standards. I appreciate the openness and willingness of interim authority representatives to engage with us on many of these issues. I note the recent constructive meetings between my deputy, Najat Rochdi, and several cabinet members, which provided an important opportunity to explore further avenues of cooperation. Mr. President, I have reported and continue to track closely concerns expressed by many Syrian women on a host of challenges. At the same time, I am pleased to report that the Syrian Women's Advisory Board was able to meet for the first time in Syria, in Damascus, since its inception in 2016. WAB members met the Minister of Social Affairs and Labour and a member of the Supreme Fatwa Council for in-depth discussions, as well as Syrian women counterparts and diplomatic representatives. WAB members and Syrian women more broadly continue to reinforce the importance of their political participation, to remind interlocutors of their unique position to observe the situation on the ground, and stress their willingness to offer advice to the interim authorities. In their engagements, the Women's Advisory Board members sought clarification on ministerial strategy, including the expected role of civil society, and reassurances that women's political engagement would indeed be ensured. Mr. President, in accordance with the Constitutional Declaration, a crucial next step in the Syrian political transition will be to establish a high committee responsible for selecting the members of the new People's Assembly, a process that includes electing 2/3 of its members. This transitional legislative authority will be responsible for working on an urgent legislative reform agenda, a critical part of rebuilding Syria's political consensus, state institutions, and creating the necessary framework on the economy, justice, political parties, elections, and much else besides. I have discussed with the interim authorities the need for substantive efforts towards inclusivity, transparency, and openness, all of which can help ensure the People's Assembly is seen as representative of the unity and diversity of the nation. I have shared concrete ideas on this with the interim authorities, and we look forward to furthering this engagement and support. Syrians also continue to look ahead to the envisaged future constitutional process, which needs to be inclusive of all social and political components in shaping a new social contract and paving the way for the free and fair elections as called for by Mr. al-Shara from the outset. However, Mr. President, there are immediate challenges of protection and confidence and participation that need to be squarely faced. In this regard, there were serious setbacks in late April when tensions dramatically escalated in Druze majority residential areas in Damascus suburbs and then on the outskirts of Sweda Governorate. This came against the background of heightened sectarian incitement. The violence left residents terrified. It caused dozens of casualties among civilians, armed Druze factions, and state security personnel, with reports of mortar and heavy weapons fire into Sweda. Clashes eventually subsided following agreements between the interim authorities and Druze representatives, but tensions remain, with fresh reports of rocket attacks into Sweda last night. Mr. President, the intra-Syrian efforts to ease tensions and maintain shared security and stability need to continue. I welcome Interim President al-Shara's statement on 2nd May, in which he prioritized dialogue and cooperation within the framework of national unity. But, and I must add, I remain concerned about the potential for new violence and at the undermining of trust that such developments inevitably bring about. Deputy Special Envoy Rushdie visited Sweden in the aftermath of the clashes and met the governor of Sweden and various groups, including Druze sheikhs, Christian and Muslim religious leaders, Bedouin tribes, leaders of armed factions, and civil society representatives. She appreciated the open and substantive discussions on various challenges, including those faced by thousands of Druze students from Sweden who were assaulted at university dormitories in several cities. As a result of these attacks, many students were forced to abandon their studies and return to Sweden. Similar concerns have been raised regarding Alawite students in the coastal regions who are dropping out of school due to ongoing security threats. Mr. President, let me also note my alarm at renewed Israeli airstrikes in Syria in the reporting period, including during the violence in Druze areas and close to the presidential palace. Such attacks are unacceptable and must cease. Syria's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity must be respected. There are clearly diplomatic possibilities, and these must be prioritized. Meanwhile, Mr. President, the unacceptable violence and incitement of communal tensions in Druze areas came on the back of the grave incidents that took place in the coastal areas in March. The situation there also remains fragile. The fact-finding committee continues to examine incidents since March 6th. Deputy Special Envoy Rushdie met its member during a visit to the coast and was briefed on ongoing efforts to collect testimonies. She also met representatives from Alawite community and civil society groups who expressed deep concern about security and economic hardship, with women being particularly affected by the current situation. Interlocutors stressed the urgent need to address the growing polarization and foster mutual understanding among the different communities. As Interim President al-Shara noted in his recent address, coexistence is part of Syria's heritage and history, and it must be preserved at all cost. Efforts to counter hate speech and promote media freedom more broadly are indispensable in this regard. Mr. President, further steps in security sector reform are also clearly needed, along with measures on disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. And, as I have reminded this Security Council about many times, action on the core issue of foreign fighters also needed. Ultimately, I hope that this can contribute to the positive intention to ensure that no weapons can be held outside of state control. And I take note of the interim defense minister's call on armed groups that have yet to integrate with the security apparatus to do so before 28 May. And I am concerned at reports of recent attacks by unknown groups on Hmeimim Air Base. Mr. President, I'm also concerned that ISIL has been escalating its attacks in various areas in recent weeks, with signs of more coordinated operations involving IEDs and the use of medium-range weapons. Mr. President, regarding the Northeast, the 10th March agreement continues to present a historical opportunity to solve one of the key outstanding issues in this conflict. We are continuing to deepen our engagement in support of this process, with whose success is critical for this transition to succeed. We have seen worrying tensions and violence around Tisrim Dam, both in late April and then again this week. We have also seen long periods of de-escalation, with the two sides continuing to talk through committee meetings. This process needs to move forward. Compromises will be needed on both sides, and progress on all key aspects of the agreement is a priority for stability in Syria and the region, for the restorations of Syria's sovereignty, unity, independence, and territorial integrity, and for the success of the overall political transition. Mr. President, the challenges facing Syria are enormous, and the real dangers of renewed conflict and deeper fragmentation have not yet been overcome. However, the Syrian people have taken heart from the fact that the decision of the last week to lift sanctions give them a better chance than before to succeed against great odds. The Syrians are looking to the interim authorities to seize this moment and push towards a fully inclusive transition in line with the principles of Security Council Resolution 2254, and to all of us to do our part as genuine partners in support. The United Nations is absolutely committed to playing its full role in this regard. Thank you, Mr. President.